Welcome to everything you need to know about product marketing interviews. My name is Kenton Kavescu. I am your host. I'm also the founder of Rocket Blocks, which is an online platform that helps candidates prepare for interviews, of course, including product marketing interviews. And today I'm really excited. We have Eleanor Horowitz on the show, who is the senior manager of product marketing at Samsara. So welcome to the show, Eleanor. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me here today.
Awesome. And maybe just before we jump in and go deep on the interview topics, it'd be great to hear a little bit about your own background, your product marketing experience to date. It'll help sort of frame the conversation about how you think about product marketing interviews.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to be here and chatting with you. So a little bit about Samsara. We're a pre-IPO growth stage startup of 1,500 people small these days, based in San Francisco. I joined when we were about 100 or so people as a first product marketer. And so I've really been able to see the company grow. And I'm really happy to share some of those experiences based how I've seen product marketing go from one person to now a much bigger team with different verticals and areas that we focus on. A bit about Samsara, the company. Quickly, for those who aren't familiar, We're a connected operations cloud company, which means we're working with businesses with really complex physical operations. So think trucking companies, construction businesses, industrial facilities, and we're helping them capture data and turn that into actionable insights to help them improve the safety, efficiency, and sustainability of their operations. So I focus, and my team focuses on our safety product and everything related to that safety vertical and solution.
Cool. Awesome. And I think your experience going from early product marketer at the company to now sort of like building up and running the team, like I imagine there was a lot of interviewing involved in going through that process. So you'll have great context for this discussion.
Yeah, definitely lots of interviews.
Maybe too many. Okay. So let's just jump into it. Tell me, when you think about, and specifically like thinking about interviewing product marketing candidates, because I'm sure you get pulled into interviews for PMs and other stuff like that as well. What are your favorite questions to ask in those interviews? And why do you think those questions are like particularly helpful or insightful in terms of evaluating the candidate on the other side of the table?
Yeah, two of my favorite questions are honestly just really basic. So first one is the version of walk me through your resume and experience. Second one is talk to me about product marketing. What is it? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? So I'll tell you why I think those are interesting and useful. Walking through your background, obviously I've seen a candidate's resume by the time I spoke to them, seen notes from a recruiter, but product marketing is so much about storytelling and so much about crafting a narrative. So what I'm really looking for when I ask that question from the start is, how are you messaging yourself? How are you positioning yourself? Like, how are you describing yourself in a way that's memorable? And that says a lot about a person, and just like you are your own product and you're marketing it. So being able to see that in action, I think boring question, but it goes a long way, and you can kind of immediately tell, like, am I captivated? Am I remembering things that they're saying? So that's definitely something I always start with. The second one around talk to me about product marketing. What does it mean to you? So I think plenty of people have probably said this to you. Product marketing is so different from company to company. I mentioned I've been at Samsara as product marketing has grown. So product marketing, even within a company, can change as time goes on. So I'm looking for a few things in that question. I think when someone starts to explain what product marketing is, they're probably talking a little bit about what they've done before, what it has been like in their past experiences. So you're getting a sense of, what has this person done? What are their strengths? What have they focused on? If someone's going to lead with sales enablement, that's a clue. If someone's going to lead with market intelligence, that's a clue. So I'm looking for just to understand a little bit more about what was their past exposure to product marketing. The other thing I'm really looking for and curious to hear more about is sort of like that critical thinking side. What did they notice about the product marketing, the ideal versus product marketing, the reality? Maybe there were things that they want product marketing to be, or that they would love to do as a product marketer, but they haven't been able to do in a past role. So being able to kind of kick off a conversation around that helps me get that like holistic perspective. Like, what did this person do? What's their exposure? How do they like think about what their role means, what they're trying to do?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And on the first question you mentioned, the tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume, I think is a super powerful question for the same exact reason that you mentioned it. It really illuminates like someone's ability to tell their own story. And then I think what's also, there's like just like pure storytelling chops that come out of that. And then I think as part of that is also like, what do they select to highlight? Because anyone sitting in these interviews, their real story take days, right? So it's like, which pieces do they? And that I think is often very illuminating as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you're picking your top value propositions. Like, what are the 3 messages you want to hit? And then from my mind as a hiring manager, I'm like, what did I remember? If they spent 3 minutes, 5 minutes walking through it, what sticks to me too?
Exactly. Cool. Okay. Well, this next question sort of relates to this because I'm sure you've asked these questions probably a lot, right? You've seen a bunch of different quality of answers to them. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see in product marketing interviews?
Yeah. And these, as I was thinking about it, I think are true to so many interviews and roles. I think they're fairly universal, but still often repeated. Not doing research is a big mistake. It's a big red flag. I know the market is very competitive for hiring managers seeking product marketers. So I totally know and expect that candidates are going to be passive here and there. But I would say, like, even if you're a passive candidate testing the water, you owe it to yourself to do some research because it's going to show if you clearly know nothing about the company.
Yeah.
If you clearly know nothing about the culture, that's going to be a red flag to me that, like, are you just trying to get a competitive offer here or what's the deal? So I'm not asking to have a 10-page report written about the company, but know the basics.
Yeah, what's like the bar for you? Like if I walked into a product marketing interview and you asked me, do you know X about the company? And I was like, no. Like at what point would that question be like, he doesn't know anything?
Yeah, it's a good question because it differs based on the company.
Yeah.
Samsara is not Google. It's you as a individual,
not a consumer
working
product.
in tech in San Francisco probably aren't using Samsara for your fleet. So I don't expect you to be an expert in trucking or like the nuances of a plumbing business, but just some clue that you've checked the website, like some clue that maybe you did some due diligence on someone on the team, whether it was me, whether it was the founders. I'm not going to say my bar is so low, but it's not too high. Just like stroking ego a little bit to show that you just put some effort into that, I think really goes far. I had someone recently in an interview who was asking me questions, and it was clear that they'd read like the fine print of my LinkedIn. And I was like, oh, I appreciate that you were curious. You wanted to learn a little bit before this conversation.
Yeah, do your research. I agree. It's one of those things. It doesn't take a ton of time to do some baseline research. And it is remarkable how often it will set you apart immediately from like probably 70% of candidates.
Yeah.
Probably put yourself in the top 30%.
It's a really easy win.
Yeah, totally. I agree. The first mistake was not enough research. Was there a second mistake you were highlighting?
So I would say a second one is sort of related to some of the questions I was asking, but when you're answering questions, not being specific about your experiences, like speaking in vagaries, I'm sure this is advice that many people give, but show, don't tell. The more descriptive, specific, data-driven you can be when you're giving answers and describing past experiences, the better. Again, makes it memorable. Like if you just rattle off, like, I've done messaging, I've done positioning, I've done this, that, the other, it's like hard for me. It's hard for me to picture, like, what does that really mean?
Totally. Yeah, there's a good quote I heard somewhere. I can't actually, funnily enough, I can't remember where it came from, but it was specificity is the soul of narrative. And it's something we tell at Rocketblocks our own writers all the time. Like, you need examples, you need specifics. That's what makes it come alive. Like, just share your own experiences if you can't think of anything else. Like, people want to hear the actual nitty gritty details.
Yeah, totally. And it goes, I think it is funny how connected, like, giving an interview and being a product marketer can be, but some of the same things you're doing and how you're portraying yourself, like, shows me how you're going to message just in general about a product. So when you talk about the specificity, I'm immediately reminded, like, it's why we do customer case studies and why we try to show the value through a customer story versus just a list of bullet point features. It brings it to life and makes it much more persuasive.
Yeah, totally. Let's switch gears a little bit. Tell me a little more about when you're running a product marketing interview and like not necessarily the one specific interview, but sort of like the panel, like the day where someone comes in or these days over Zoom and does somewhere like probably like 3 to 5 chats with a bunch of people from the team. You as a hiring manager, what is like the ultimate list of skills that you're trying to suss out for a product marketing candidate? Like, does this person have X, Y, and Z? You know, what are like the top 3 that you really care about? Where it's like, if they don't possess that, it's probably just a non-starter.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for us, it really is a bit of a matrix.
Okay.
So I think the non-negotiables are what we would call like our cultural values or like our leadership principles. And those, I think you really, like every candidate, we're kind of looking to see those values shine through. I say it's a matrix because then there are the skills, the product marketing skills, and we do have a list of those when they're on the job descriptions as well. It's like the messaging, the go-to-market, sales enablement, pieces like that. Those I would say are important, but they're on a spectrum. So we're less looking for like, do you have it? And like more the nuance of like, what do you have? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses there? If that makes sense. So I think like in those panels, part of what we're really trying to figure out is what skills do you have? And it's not a deal breaker if you have one and not the other, or one is stronger and one is weaker. But if you were to join on day one, like this is the project we'd assign you that you would nail independently, and this is something that we'd really want to like coach you on and work through together. So I think the skills are a little bit more on a spectrum. For us, some of the cultural values that I mentioned that are a little bit more non-negotiables, and this is a little bit more how I'll assign in a panel. I'll say you focus on growth mindset, and I'm thinking more about, has this person showed through their past experiences that they're able to learn new things, that they're coachable, resilient, adaptable, etc. So for us, I would say those are some of the skills, the things we're really vetting for in a panel. Other things being really customer centric, having customer like empathy for users, and they're a little bit more, I'd say, like behavioral, cultural values in that sense. So not like it's not a check mark, like everything with product marketing.
And tell me a little more about something like you mentioned at one point, like messaging, go to market. Those might be 2 things we're trying to evaluate. What type of questions do you ask to understand? Like, do you say, hey, like if you were going to take X Samsara product to market, how would you do it? Or do you lean towards, hey, tell me about a time you've run a GTM in the past? Like, do you do a mix of both? Like, how do you like to try and gauge that ability?
Yeah, definitely the like, tell me about a time when, I think are what we typically will go with. And as an interviewee, advice I always got was to use the STAR method in those situations. I don't know if those come up and, you know, like goes back to some of the earlier conversation about like being specific, using real examples. So I'm asking that. And again, what I'm trying to do is dig into like really the level of detail, like how in the weeds were you? Something or about product marketing, and especially with Samsara, is like we're still a scrappy team, and you're still, as a product marketer, you have to execute kind of at every level. You might be planning a huge integrated campaign with lots of stakeholders, or you might be running a launch like totally on your own, responsible for the content, driving campaigns, etc. So I'm trying to figure out, like, were you kind of an armchair marketer directing things from afar in a past life, or would you be comfortable copy editing the blog post if need be? So I'm looking for that. Evaluating like that kind of level of ability to execute and like desire. Like, what do you also want to do with your career right now? Are you like, I want to send this to the agency and they're going to do it all? Like, to me, that can be a red flag just for what we need in the team, because we don't have that agency.
Got it. Yeah. Cool. And then just one last follow-up on this. Like, you mentioned sort of panel of interviews, and I think the way you were referencing it sounded like, okay, like I've got person X, they're going to sort of drill into this topic, person Y is going to drill into this other topic. Do you, as part of your PMM interview processes, run like an actual sort of presentation interview, or at some point the candidate will come in and either present on some sort of like fictional scenario you've given them, or present some of their own work? Is that part of your process? If yes, why is it important? If not, why do you not think it matters?
Yeah, we do always have a kind of homework round. And in the past, it was an in-person presentation. Now, with being remote, we've adapted it a little bit. So it still is like more just an opportunity to see a person, first of all, showing what they can do. If we're asking,
Yeah.
like, typically it is a hypothetical, like, what would you do for this? How would you launch this? How would you analyze this situation? And we're looking to see, how do you think on your toes? We're looking to see, how do you react when you're asked tough questions and when you're given feedback? Like, we're trying to pry and just see, maybe you said you're really open to feedback, but when we give you feedback on a panel, you really like get defensive, and looking to see if some of those initial promises sort of shake out in
If
real
they
life.
actually hold true, tested
Yeah.
under pressure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
exactly.
Cool. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. And if you're, let's say, talking to a friend, they're interested in breaking into product marketing for the first time, but they don't have marketing experience, what tips do you give him or her? And you can sort of make up, like, if a person like X came to me, but like, what are some of the key things that you would say, look, if this is the goal, here's where you got to start. You got to start thinking about like X and Y.
Yeah, sometimes those candidates, those types of people are the best candidates,
Why's
honestly.
that?
I mentioned earlier, product marketing can change so much from company to company. So sometimes if you're too much in the mold of one type of company's product marketing, as a hiring manager, I'm thinking, like, are you going to be able to adapt and shift your mindset? Whereas someone who's maybe coming from like a background in journalism or a background in customer success or something like that, I think they inherently are trying to learn new things and trying to bring new perspectives. So I definitely am never like, oh, it's a red flag if you've never had product marketing experience. I think in some ways that can be an asset. I think the advice I would give them is to, in those cases, it's just even more important to have a point of view of like, why is it do you want to go into product marketing? What are the things you're going to be really good at? And what are like those unique things you're going to bring to the table, having not come from product marketing, and then being humble about, here's what I don't know anything about. When I joined Samsara, I did not know anything about sales enablement to a huge direct sales team, not something I'd ever worked on before. I pivoted into product marketing from venture capital. And like my interest was more around product market fit and messaging. And I didn't ever try to hide the fact that I'd never worked with a large sales team. It was like, but here are the reasons why I think I'll be able to learn.
Yeah.
And so I think, having that humility, being able to say, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, here's why I'm going to be coachable on this, here's what I can bring to the table. We think of interviews as this like very one-sided, like me asking you things, but the more you can make it into a conversation and like empathize also with the hiring manager in those instances, like a hiring manager wants to hire someone as much as you want to get the job. So being able to say like, listen, I know I'm not your traditional resume or applicant, but here's what I think I could bring. If it's a fit, it's going to be a fit. If it's not, like, hey, you might know another place or person who's hiring for something more like me.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a few good points there, which is one, like, if it's not a fit, it's going to be miserable if you're the candidate and you get that job anyway. Like, for some reason you get it and it's not a fit, then the stuff that was not a fit there, like, assuming that's actually needed on the job, like, it's going to be painful. And then the other part you mentioned about, if you get to the point where it's a conversation, I think that's a really good thing, because then it feels like you're actually just working together and talking through an issue and what it would be like to be a coworker. And that's, I think, sort of where you want to arrive. Even in things that are, I talk about this a lot with like case interviews, but the case interview, like, I think people get worked up around the format and all. It's like, it's going to work a specific way. And in some cases, like, there may be charts or data they pull out, whatnot. But at the end of the day, like, it's really still just a conversation about a business problem. On the job, you're just going to be talking about this particular type of business problem, trying to work through it. And it's like, interviewers don't just want to see someone like robotically like solving a problem. They want to have a conversation about the problem. So I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think we mentioned like day one on the job is going to be tough if you kind of don't actually like what the job is going to be about. And if you haven't clearly aligned on that, and that I think is so true and often just under recognized in the interview process. Like, you all want to make sure it's the right fit on both sides.
Yeah, because it's a pain. It's a pain for both sides going through the process. Like, what's worse than like getting a job and then 2 weeks into it, you're like, I don't actually like this.
Yeah. And I think that also earlier in your career, sometimes you have a tendency to feel like, oh, I have this gap. I need to compensate for it and like find some way to answer this type of question in an interview and hide it. And I think more experienced people in interviews and better interviewers are just like, yeah, that's not something I've done a lot of before. And like being able to kind of have that aha moment in an interview is actually quite helpful. It goes back to like making it memorable. If I leave the interview, I'm like, okay, I get this person. I get what they're going to be good at. I get what their weaknesses are. And it's not necessarily a deal breaker. It's just going to be a part of the package. Like if I feel comfortable coaching someone on that, totally fine.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Okay, one final question for you. If you are going through product marketing interviews, what is one or two key ways you think you can set yourself apart from the crowd? What should you do to really stand out, make sure that at the end of the day, you're the person that gets the call with the offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about a good number of these things, doing the research, telling good stories. I think a lot of it probably can be summarized by having a point of view of who you are and what you're going to bring to this role, what's going to differentiate you, and not being afraid to say who you are and what's differentiating you, because ultimately, again, it's a two-way street. You want to look for a role that's the right fit. And so being able to show that perspective, I think matters a lot. I think similarly, a point of view of what the company could do better and like how you're going to help that company grow and like how you're going to hit the ground running on day one. A hiring manager is in this position of needing to hire because they like desperately need help and like desperately want to see how this person is going to contribute on day one and long term. And so I think having that point of view, empathizing with the hiring manager, trying to figure out how this is going to work for both of you.
Cool. So basically like nail your unique value prop, like your unique value prop for this role.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's great. I think that's a perfect place to end. Thank you so much for joining, Eleanor, and sharing all of your wisdom about product marketing and product marketing interviews.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you. Have a good day.
This podcast is produced by ShareBird, the peer mentoring platform for product marketers. It is the place to discover on-demand resources to help you with your product marketing. To view past episodes, go to sharebird.com. And if you're preparing for product marketing interviews, check out Rocketblock's Product Marketing Interview Prep Tools, the best place to practice PMM interview skills and get live coaching to ace your PMM interviews. Visit us at rocketblocks.me.